For those of you who weren't here in the first presentation, I'm Joe Carbonera. I'm the editorial director for Zumba Group. We publish Food Service Equipment Supplies magazine and Restaurant Development Design magazine. Editorial director is just a fancy name for a guy who's in charge of all the typos. That's kind of my job at the company. It's my pleasure today to moderate a nice panel discussion here talking about the importance of installation with food service when it comes to food service equipment. You know, installation is not the sexiest topic in the world, but it's really underrated in terms of how important it is. Because if you don't get that installation right, it affects the operator's opinion. It affects the operator's ability to do business, number one. Number two, it affects the operator's perception of equipment brands and the people that sold it to them. So it's one of those things that it's really easy to gloss over, and the consequences are really hard to overcome. They take a long time to really overcome them. And I'm thrilled today to be working with a panel here. We have two operators and a service agent here working with me today, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. John, start with you.
I'm John Seuss. I'm a regional facilities manager with the Cheesecake Family of Restaurants.
I'm Dan Gibbons, the National Director of Facilities for Topgolf.
I'm Jeremy Miller, Head of Sales and Project Coordination for Cold Tex Refrigeration and Kitchen Equipment Professionals.
Thank you guys for being here today. So our objectives today, we want to explore a little bit more detail why installation is so important. We want to discuss what goes into an installation. It's not like when I buy a new toaster for my kitchen at home and I just plug it in and it works, or a new coffee maker at home. It can be kind of a complicated thing. And we want to share some best practices on what to do and what not to do when it comes to creating a successful and a smooth installation process. So with that in mind, Dan, I want to start with you. From your perspective at Topgolf, tell me, why is good installation important to your business?
Well, it's about the downtime and that coordination, making sure that when the equipment has arrived from the manufacturer, that we get it back in, we get it installed, turn around. That you have to do it early in the morning. It's got to be done by 8 o'clock so they can start prepping for the day. So the pre-work, usually, like in my world, I want to handle the pre-work of obtaining the equipment, and then it's that coordination and scheduling of when can we get somebody there, being punctual. Hey, if we say we're going to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning to start the install, and everybody shows up at 6 and the job gets done. Because ultimately, like I said, it's about the downtime. We're without that piece of equipment, and it's hurting operations. It's not, as you know, we don't have 3 or 4 ovens, extra laying around that we can, utilize in a kitchen. So we've value engineered the package down. So when one component of that is out of the equation, we've got to get it back up. But it's the impact on operations, impact on the culinary delivery.
John, how do you Cheesecake Factory, how do you guys approach installs? Because it's a pretty big size operation, pretty healthy, diverse menu, right? So there's a lot going on in there. So how do you approach installs to make sure that they're effective and efficient?
A lot of our installs will be overnight, with the exception of maybe something like a pasta cooker that's a little more plug and play. Water line, gas line, they tend to be a little bit easier, but that's still going to be like first call in the morning, 6 o'clock, like you're saying. You say you don't want to affect operations. Some of the bigger ones that we've done, like combi ovens, when we introduced that that's a whole new thing. So it's being prepared too. They had to have training and all that, but we went in on a Monday night, but Monday day they had to do prep heavy because they really weren't going to be able to use their prep kitchen like they normally would on Tuesday morning. So working with and informing ops of what's going on, how it's going on, when we have to interrupt you. I don't like to, but something like that's where you didn't have to do that because you were going to have to do and being prepared for if something goes sideways.
Yeah.
Having a backup plan, that's having your prep done. So a lot of our stuff will be overnight to try to avoid any operational downtime at all.
Yeah, minimizing that
You know,
downtime.
because we want to have all 200 and whatever items for you at a restaurant, right?
Sure.
You know, there's no such thing as 86 in an item at Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah, minimizing that downtime, because that's revenue that's never coming back, right? Labor, you have to, any downtime you have, it takes that, whatever staff you do have away from cooking it, that cuts into efficiency, that can affect guest satisfaction, and a whole bunch of other things can happen there. So really, really important. Jeremy, one of the things I love about talking to service agents is you guys know where the bodies are buried. And if you don't know, sometimes during your work, you might find one buried behind the wall somewhere. You guys see what works, you guys see what doesn't work. It's really common in restaurant industry in particular, and food service in general, for operators to go into what I would call second generation spaces, meaning like they're not the first restaurant or the first food service operation to go in there. And when you're going in there and installing equipment, it's not as simple as just wheeling in the range or the dishwasher and plugging it in and going. So what's it like running and installing in a second or third generation restaurant space?
Well, you really want to focus on the pre-planning portion of that. Going into a good plan in any space, whether it's new construction or remodels, is the step one. You got to know the equipment, plan ahead, have everything delivered on time, talk with your end users, talk with your subs, electrical, are the utilities correct? Are there correct power voltages there? Did they order the correct equipment? You know, dealers, you know, they can sell a piece of equipment sometimes and it could possibly be a wrong size. It doesn't fit to the door even. I've had a lot of different situations where, you know, we're given a spec or a list of equipment, we're installing it, and nobody's thought about that one thing. It's too big to fit into the building, or doesn't have the right voltage or whatever it might be. So it's crucial to talk with the end users, the dealers, the factories, and have a broad knowledge and proper communication.
Yeah, getting the whole supply chain involved and doing your pre-work is something that I've heard from all three of you earlier in our conversation. I think that's really important. I think it's really easy to overlook the service agent in this process. Too often people just think, well, we'll just call the service agent when it's broken. But for install and understanding how something might work in a space, I think that's really important. They have certain information or a certain perspective, I think, that is really, really important. The other thing I noticed is that each place deals with installs different. You know, an independent's going to handle installs one way. When you look at colleges and universities, they might handle installs a slightly different way. We know jails are going to do their own thing. But then in your case, like with Topgolf, you have a team that helps you with installs and kind of what I thought was a fairly unique approach. So talk about your operations approach to installs and how who on your team supports it, works with it, and so forth.
So we're unique in the fact that we have the opportunity to have a facilities team at every location. You know, there's no way in hell we could operate our business 65,000 square feet, 14 acres without some kind of a team. As I told Joe, you know, at any given time, 485 things are going to go wrong at a Topgolf venue. So we have a team, we have a facilities manager, we have an assistant facilities manager who is communicating with myself and the regionals on what the problems are. Then we dive into, okay, are we going to retire this asset? So there are eyes and ears and boots on the ground to get us our pictures, get us our information, and then we take over. Okay, we know what your situation is. We're not custom built kitchens like a cheesecake is. So we do have that luxury of being able to plug and play equipment. But again, pre-work information, what is it? Where's it at? Have we checked electrical? Have we checked gas? Have we checked all the things that we might need to address? And then once we have the equipment specification all nailed down with the manufacturer and somebody like Jim himself, you know, we've already done all that pre-work. The manufacturer is going to ship us exactly what we need, and it's also pre-configured. There is no custom work, there is no programming, there's none of this that needs to happen at the venue. So it delivers, the guys unbox it, they put the casters on it, peel the plastic off of it, take the old one out, put the new one in. So we're able to execute that successfully because, your point earlier around pre-work and getting all the information as much as you can ahead of time, and then standardizing the package as much as you possibly can. Try to stay out of the custom world because that's where things get a little more complex.
Great points. And I think it's so much of this, we're just gonna install it, we're just gonna go in. It's just so much easier said than done. Jeremy, I wanna come back to you for a second because we all know, maybe a lot of you aren't really great cooks, but I'm pretty sure you all know the recipe for ice. Water, electricity, and refrigeration, right? The recipe for ice hasn't changed in a really, really long time. It stayed really consistent. But installing an ice machine comes with a lot of variables. So talk about I'm just using this piece of equipment as an example, but talk about what does it take for a successful ice machine installation?
Well, that's a broad question because, Dan points out they use self-contained equipment on everything, and that's a great business model to go to. Some stores need to keep the heat load in the restaurant down, so they go remote. Your building could literally not be sized to handle all the heat the cooking equipment puts into it. So, installing an ice machine could be as simple as cutting a water line and a power line and drain and throwing it up there and repiping that all in. I can get one of those done in 2 to 4 hours with a good team. And then you have the remote refrigeration systems or ice machines or anything like that. Lord, there could be roofers, electricians, all kinds of items involved in that. We try to do it as efficiently as possible, but if you are changing models, maybe that model is obsolete. Going from one brand up to 15-year-old ice machine, you've got to change line sets, look at roofing. Are there curbs? Are there electrical issues? And are they the same unit? And are you upsizing? Most people, I find, increase production when they change something. Like, hey, I got a 1,000-pound ice machine. I need another 1,500. I need more production. While I'm doing this, I'm going to upgrade my system. So communicating with the site again and the people and knowing what you're putting in is the biggest battle. They can buy anything off the street and it could be completely wrong for the application. You have to guide their hand through that process and do the best job. Because if you don't do a good job, you can buy the best ice machine in the world or the cheapest. A great install is the number one thing. It'll last better, it'll perform better if it's properly maintained and properly installed.
It helps with warranty, helps with so many different things. All right, so John, like with Cheesecake Factory, you guys are known for, let's start with the name, cheesecake, right? But it's a big menu. It's a little bit of something for everybody, right? A lot of food. You have big, beautiful restaurants. And it's been a while since I've been in one, but I remember also in the front, you have that retail case, right? That bakery case where it shows the cheesecake up front. So it's kind of a complicated setup, right? When you have it, you operate from a lot of malls or like maybe standalones that are on mall properties and that sort of thing. Really kind of ups the level, I would say, of complexity, right? When you're doing installation. So how do you coordinate all those moving parts to make sure that you get a good install for your locations?
Again, it's planning. It really is. It really is. It starts with walking that site. From like that piece of equipment, whether it's coming through the back door, the front door. How is it showing up? Is there a location for the truck to drop it off? And when we're in malls, it can be very affect you because malls want things too, especially when you're on their roofs. That's not your roof, that's their roof. And when we're installing something that's remoted like an ice machine, he better have a COI on file with that Simon property because they're not gonna let him on at all. Also, we try not to open that can of worms with the landlord, right? Let's be honest. But once it's open, it isn't just him now. If I have to have a tile guy there because we're taking out a bakery case and it's on a curb and it's tiled up and the only way you're getting it out of there is like that. It's been there for 18 years. You have to rebuild the curb. So you have a mill worker, you have a tile worker. Now you've opened the can of worms with the COI, well, they want all the trades. Are all of those trades, have they worked on that Simon property before? And it's not just Simon. You would think, oh, okay, well, they did work over here at this Grapevine Mall. Not the same as Katie Mills. So there's that side of the coordination. It's more almost administrative in a way. Like you have to make sure that all of these people are lined up, they're on time, like you're saying, that's the huge thing too. And having like a big one is having especially a bakery case, because that's a big one, right? It's in the name, right? We did a remodel. We don't do too many remodels on those cases, and that was at the Galleria Mall. And, that was a huge project. People are very, very sensitive about the Cheesecake Factory bakery display case, and there's some operators that get some very big feelings on that, if it doesn't go the way it's supposed to go. So there's pre-meetings, several of them. So I would say just, you gotta have that vision of what it's gonna look like, but I go back to, be prepared for something's not gonna go right.
Prepare for December.
Right. So I would say.
Yeah, well, you've all taken your car in, right? You've all taken your car in, or you've had some work done at your home, and you've had that conversation. As long as the car's out, we should probably do this. Or so long as the walls are open, we should probably do that. I would think if you're replacing a piece of equipment, like that bakery case,
You're
right?
gonna schedule events, what time,
Yeah,
who's removing the piece of equipment, where's it going, which trades hauling it off? Somebody's gotta be responsible for that. Is the refrigeration guy gonna do that? Is the handyman doing that? Also with us in that case too, we have to coordinate with them all. Like, the bakery case showed up, but I don't have extra space. I don't know about y'all. Do you have extra space for, this giant, case on a pallet? So we had to coordinate with them. Hey, can we please leave it on your loading dock for a week or till we can get this installed?
yeah, a lot of those things.
And they have to check in with security and making sure that those guys understand that. That's a big one. I have a restaurant in Austin on 2nd Street in the Google building. Special. So just telling you, man, you got to check. They have to check in with security. They have to have COIs. It's
24-hour notice.
and
to
they
get on
can't.
the roof.
And you can't give them a notice
No.
that you're going on there. I have to do it.
Exactly. I
So
have to
they don't
call
even
you.
let point-to-point conversation go on. It has to come from me. So it's it makes those types of things kind of challenging. But you have to include them in there when you're on other people's property sometimes. RTUs are a big one. It's not kitchen equipment, but it's
Yeah.
air conditioning. And again, you're back to it's not your roof; it's their landlords. They need to be informed when a crane shows up too. You can't just roll up to do an ice machine or a remote refrigeration with a crane, and the landlord's like, "I'm sorry, what?"
How fast can you get it and say, how fast can you do it?
Yeah. It's how fast, but, I've dealt with both of these brands and larger brands are in malls, and you have to have a crane plan. Like most jobs, you don't have to have a crane plan. They'll want a crane plan for malls, Grapevine Mills. You got to have a plan that's costs a bit more money to show them exactly how you're going to pick something up. It's a little bit redundant, but I'm going to pick it up with a
their ops
crane and I'm going to
manager
put
is
it
gonna
right
get
back in the
involved.
same spot. Yeah.
Their ops manager's going to get involved because
Yeah.
he wants to make sure you're not going to destroy the fascia on the building and that thing's not going to drop and go through his roof.
There are some good things to it because safety, where you put the crane, emergency access points to the building, egress, you can't block those things. So there's good reasoning for that
Galleria, there's a
proper
parking
planning.
garage under it. I can't use a crane.
Yeah,
You can use
exactly.
a helicopter.
Helicopter and everything. I've done many helicopter picks, and it's fun. It's cool, but it's a little bit it's troublesome. You got to clear it with air traffic control.
Have you ever wondered?
Yeah. If you ever wonder why my bill was that high, it's like I have to pay a lot of fees to get this thing done a lot of
So if
times.
you're going to replace your air conditioners over there, you want to replace quite a few of them at one time.
Yeah, try to budget that. We do that a lot. Hey, you got this
Like
one,
30 grand.
everything's 15 years old. Let's talk about just doing it one time.
Yeah.
You guys are making me feel really good about my current situation.
Yes. He's all custom. He has to have me. You're replacing things
I
yourself.
don't deal with malls anymore, and there's a guy sitting out there in the audience. We lived hell years of custom locations and different restaurants and different really painful places. So, yeah, you guys are making me feel really good.
Dan, you bring up a good point. You talk about not so much about custom. I mean, we are seeing a move in the industry toward people going toward more off-the-shelf product and maybe getting some things configured. you talked earlier in your comments, Dan, about making sure that product is pre-configured before it gets there, so it slides in a little bit easier. Give us a few examples of what are some things you might get pre-configured before you have it pre-configured before it shows up.
So met with all the manufacturers, whether it's the Congo therms, all the way from the complexity of a Congo therm oven with our recipes and everything preloaded, all the way down to the simple roll-in refrigerator. It comes, cutting boards already been cut back, thermostats have already been preset. Everything is pre-configured before it ever got delivered. That way it's a lot easier to plug and play. There's a couple of pieces that we still need to start up on, because you've got to hook up an oil line or whatever to the fryers. And then a lot of times our chefs need assistance in programming the timer buttons and a few things like that. But all through my experience and through my years, it was the set yourself up for success by not just coming over and having a conversation with Ford, Seaver, and Wallace. It is about going to the manufacturer, talking to those guys. What is possible at their level so that once it gets put into a box, it gets put onto a truck, your success on the final end of that is going to be so much easier, faster, better, because you don't need to wait on a technician to show up that morning just to reset the thermostat. Read the fine print. Where is it set at the factory? It's all preset to 38 degrees. Well, because that's in SF. Well, I want mine at 34. So who's going to do that? And I don't want to have to wait on a tech to show up that morning and do that. Those are things that I have done throughout my career and my experience, setting myself up for success way at the very beginning of the whole chain. Before a bolt is even put into a refrigerator, all of that has been established and all that's very clear with the manufacturer. I don't need a dealer to deal with that for me. I don't need a service agent to deal, with that for me. I'm handling that on the front end of the thing. And I don't know if I could stress enough about how important it is to meet with the manufacturer, go to their plants, see how the equipment is made and assembled, and fully understand their manufacturing process, because then you understand what the end product is and what you're using. How does it work? Talk with the engineers. Don't just sit down with the sales reps. Go out on the floor, talk to the production managers, talk with the engineers. You will learn so much more about what you're using and understand what the potential problems are on service operation. To put it bluntly, how can they screw this thing up? So if I understand it, then I can get ahead of those problems.
You said something really interesting. You said, I don't need a service agent, I don't need a dealer to deal with this problem. We do it with the manufacturer. I'm dealing. What are some things, and I love it because it's split between operator and service agent. What are some things that a dealer can do on the install side for the service agent and for the operator that you go, oh, this guy's competent, he's got me covered, he's done his homework, versus maybe you're working with somebody new, or maybe a dealer's like, yeah, I need you to do a job and I don't you go out and look at it. That's really horrible for you. What are some things that dealers can do or say and make good on that you're like, oh, you're competent, I like you, let's keep going?
I'd love to jump on it. I think we might touch on it later too, but it's the communication aspect. So a dealer will tell you exactly what I'm providing, and then here are my list of exclusions. Let's just take a walk-in, for example. I'll put in a walk-in, and you're gonna provide, I'm gonna give you a list, I'm gonna provide drain line sets, insulation crane, I can bring a roofer and electrician, I can do it turnkey. If you're not doing it turnkey, you'll say, hey, you need to get, we're not including the electrical, we're not including the roofing, we're not including, X, Y, Z. Telling the end user what you need, like, hey, we're not including this, but you do need to think about it. You have fire suppression in this building. You're not thinking about it, but you'll need to drop that fire suppression head into the building. Not only knowing what has to happen or what you're providing or what I'm not providing or whatever that case is, knowing what all steps go into the job. That's the key thing. If he knows what's needed, then he knows, okay, I'll get my subcontractors, I'll get my fire suppression team, I'll get my alarm, my controls team, You got to interface it with building alarm and BMS back management. They were talking about that in the last panel. Things are going so smart nowadays. You can't. It's so hard. Like Cat5 data cable to it. You not only just hook it up to the Cat5 line, you got to make sure your firewall allows access for that. And you can't do it like some K through 12 applications because they don't want firewall access implementing that. Do they use the same router, modem, internet for their building management versus their, their whatever the interface, their POS system? You can't be on the same system. So it's so much that goes into it. If you communicate properly, I'm providing this. You need to also get this. So think about that. That's the best thing for the customer to know. What steps are needed for this job?
I think installation checklist based upon what equipment you have, right? I got an oven, and I know what my dimensions of my delivery doors are. So hey, let's validate to make sure we can get access, because I've taken off revolving doors. I had to coordinate between revolving doors taken off to get an oven through. I've had to take windows out to get ovens through. But again, knowing that dimension of refrigeration unit, if you have a refrigerator base, saying, hey, look at all the turns, go out and do a pre-site inspection, because
Make sure we return it negative.
yeah, or can you flip up top, again,
Yeah.
what's that gonna do? That oil compressor, you basically have violated all your warranty when you get just to install it. And I think we've all done that before, but at the end of the day, I think that the dealer's responsibility is to say, this has happened to me in the past, let me just create a list and maybe an ongoing checklist. Every time we install one of these, hey, let's go out, and this does need a pre-site survey, but this doesn't, right? I think you helping that customer, like, I've had ovens where I had to go back to the manufacturer, like Dan said, and put a different hinge on, because the door, all you do is take the doors off, but the hinge they had wouldn't let you, take them off, they were able to go back out, right? So we had to go back and redesign the hinges. But the manufacturer won't do it, especially if your customer's gonna be buying repeat, the national chain customer, whatever you are. But,
I would say that's kind of like what you're saying as a dealer is knowing what my spec is.
yeah.
We have a long time relationship with Trimark.
Sure.
And I know some of you guys are aware of, they're massive, right? They are, the big boy. But they know Cheesecake Factory spec. Kind of like what you're saying with the hinge. They already know to pre-order.
You don't have to walk them through anything new.
Right. So knowing your customer and knowing, like he's saying, if you're selling him, I don't know, say Continental Refrigeration, as or Forbes, right? And he wants it preset to 34, but this, you can, when you're cutting that PO, you've already got the spec to him. Because you know him, you know that spec, and you know what the scope of work's gonna be. We're supplying panels, door closures, remote refrigeration, that's it. All electrical, plumbing, all MEPs supplied by others. That way the end user understands, okay, he's others and supplied by, right? And especially on something big like that, get to know who the installer is too, that your customer's using. You need to have conversations with them, because we can get in on that. When is it showing up? What's the, where's it shipping to? Is a walk-in shipping to the restaurant? Is it shipping to the dealer? Is it shipping to the installer? Who's receiving?
Walk in on and off a truck, I'm sure you've never ran that one before.
That's
Yeah, I've
fun.
never hand unloaded a walk-in before ever in my life. For sure. I've never had an installer complain about having to hand unload a 53-foot semi-trailer full of panels. Yeah.
It's the forklift.
Yeah, where's the forklift today?
Well, to add on something that you just said was on that specification. It can be very mundane and bring nothing, but I'm not asking the dealer to establish all the specs. I went to the manufacturer and established those specs.
Dealer just has to be.
So that
absolutely
way,
involved.
every time I ask for a PO, I ask for a quote from my dealer, they've already reached out to the rep who also has my specification because they've gotten it from the manufacturer. So I kind of go all the way back to the axle and make sure that everything is solidified there and it's buttoned down, all the way down to the number of bar dividers for the pans. All the way down to every last nut, bolt, and screw Well, guess what? My quote is that friggin' long. It takes up 2 pages for one refrigerator. Hush, Robbie. Robbie knows. I mean, our specification is 2 pages long.
Yeah.
But we've gotten it to that granularity. So from a dealer perspective, that's the communication and conversation you gotta have with your customer, your end user first, so that you know what they need. It doesn't show up, and then you get the phone call and say, well, it didn't have the right pan dividers, it
You need
didn't
to
have
be
all
like
this.
placing it for you before it gets there.
It's a partnership, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I have with like ice cream freezer. You know, we have 2, one for the bakery, one for the bar. Do you think Cheesecake Factory put the same one in?
Hell no. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
I like how all the operators in the room are like, of course not.
Duh. I'm not a designer, and you know, our senior VP of that, don't do that with him. Don't say things like, well, why don't we design it that way? We'll remind you that you're in facilities and you need to stay there. And, you know, but when I call my dealer and I'm like, I need an ice cream freezer for the bar, he already knows, right? So we don't have to go through that, but it is because, you know, this is 30 years, you know, so, you know, you built that spec, you know, we've been building that as well. So even though we may have a lot of custom refrigeration, like on all of our line doors are all custom, right? But the one thing is, they are all the same for every single Cheesecake Factory, right? They are the same. So they do come, you know, with our defrost timer, because we specifically want our defrost at specific times. So they're set up that way. And then we have a cut in and cut out that's specific, because I've had it where I had new installers who are like, well, yeah, usually you don't do that on, well, we don't care, we want 24 degrees. Well, most guys do 28, I understand, Cheesecake does 24. You know, so you know, because you've done PM on them, you know, their settings are different. It isn't like everybody else's, and we want them that way for a reason, but we have developed that over the years to get that. So when you're doing that kind of install, the dealers rolled in. It's kind of when is it showing up? You know, asking us the questions: do you want it delivered to the dealer? Do you want it delivered to the site? You know, having that insight, like you know what your customer's place looks like.
Right.
You know, are they going to really receive a 118-inch pizza unit? I mean, maybe. I mean,
I gotta tell you now.
yeah, exactly.
You know,
So
it's just refreshing to hear that it does come down to communication, but also that you can't fake it.
Well, it's not just, I think the thing that I'm hearing in this conversation is, you know, it's teamwork, right? We're in Texas, so it's football country, right? So Georgia and Alabama are going to play for the SEC championship this weekend, right? And, you know, the Georgia offense, like, they're all going over the same game plan. So making sure that you guys are all operating off the same game plan, understanding but why you're doing certain things. Why does the temperature have to be configured for the bar ice cream freezer have to be at this one versus, you know, why is there a different one in the back? Why do I need to do this, or what am I going to do? You all depend on each other for it to go well, and I think sharing that information. I think where parts of the supply chain can get in trouble is when they're not trusting each other as teammates, and they're not sharing that information. I think bringing Jeremy and his crew into the conversation sooner than later is smart. Earlier, we had design consultants in here. Getting them involved in the conversation sooner than later is smart, because it can stave off, I think, a whole lot of problems. So I think it's really being a team on it, because what you guys have described, I haven't heard, it's a full team effort to get a piece of equipment into any one of the facilities we're talking about, pretty much for any one of your customers, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, so it's really a team effort, because you got to work with everybody, but you got to start at the front end, working with dealers and reps to quote the right process. If you have almost like a list, I won't point out who, what, and why, but there's some dealers who say, here's a set of drawings, please provide me a quote. And there's some people who say, hey, here's a quote, I want you to provide me the walk-in. I want you to assume it's 50-foot line sets. I want you to assume no electrical, you don't need any permits, no inclusions. We will provide this. They will literally give you the XYZ of exactly what they want on that quote.
And that's nicer to deal with for you.
And I'm like, thank you. You've answered every question. I was about to email you and say, hey, you know, blueprint never shows where the condenser is. I mean, Lord knows that engineer designers never put that in the right location. So I'm assuming, you know, line goes straight up in 25 foot, 50 foot. but no, it goes over, got a clear ductwork, clear structural beams, and, move it around plumbing lines and hydronic lines, and now I'm at a 75-foot line set. Here's your change order. Wait, you had the blueprints just like me. So having clear-cut guidance is always the best way, and that starts at the front end before they've even been involved, because we all know we're bidding all of the ISDs, all the jobs, they don't hear about us until that PO is awarded. Now we start the communication chain with the proper planning. Here's the equipment, here's our plan, here's my team, here's what we're doing. So it's a two-part thing. I've got to start early on with you on my quote process and your bid process, then initiate a totally different team partnership to make sure the job goes well. So the reps and the dealers and the factories and the installers are starting a partnership to give you a price. Now we're starting a new partnership with the end users, facility directors, teams, managers, suppliers, cranes, everybody else to give you a finished product. It can be complicated, and you cannot know what to ask. It's not wrong for you to admit, hey, I don't know what I don't know. And that's the biggest fear. Most people want to seem super knowledgeable. I'm a salesman, I know everything about this equipment, but you don't know everything about installation practices or their facility needs or Dan's needs and how he looks at it. Yeah.
But yeah, the helicopter thing blew my mind.
Oh yeah. You can't reach. You can only reach so far with the crane.
You can, I guess you can't reach it.
Yeah.
That's what you gotta do.
Pretty wild.
It's sometimes cheaper. You do enough equipment at one time. 15, I've done 15 ACs at one time in Friendly Chevrolet in Dallas. Had to do it with a helicopter because it would have taken me 2 days to do it with a crane, and two of the biggest cranes you've ever seen, because you got to reach across this building. You would think it'd be more expensive, but no, it was cheaper for a helicopter. $10,000 for a helicopter sounds pricey when you realize I would have had two cranes, a semi truck. Took me 2 days, one day to set the crane up, the next day to do all the work, and then we got to move the crane again to do it again. So yeah, planning is crazy.
Well, let's continue down that line of planning for a second, because John, you have places, you have restaurants all over the country in a lot of different places. I bet they're all designed exactly the same at the back of the house, aren't they? No. So talk about that, like in terms of understanding that, just because we're all one Cheesecake Factory, how there might be some subtle differences from one location to the next that you really need to take into account when talking about
I'll go with line doors is another one. Some are on curbs, some are on casters, some are on legs. I have 28 restaurants. I can't remember them all. I've got a good idea. I carry 4 brands too. So, talking about a dealer, we actually have 2 different dealer partnerships, and let me tell you, I love my Trimark relationship a lot more than my other one. And it's back to, they understand our systems, right? They have our specs. But I said this to him on the call, which when it comes to the drawings, it's trust and validate, right? Things have changed. One of my locations is 29 years old. There was a mechanical manager with a cheesecake for years and years and years. He moved on. We didn't have one for years, and we got a new one. It took a couple years before he had total control. So on the drawing, it shows that this bakery unit is remote. We go to replace it. I go up there. It's not remote. It's self-contained now. So someone's changed the drawing. And when you go on the roof, the original drawing showed one big parallel rack, which runs all of your refrigeration. They're good and bad. They're good in if you're having a problem somewhere, the system can continue to run. They're bad because if you have a refrigeration leak, you find out when you're about 100 pounds short. It's very expensive to charge. Someone got rid of that, and then they put in 4 condensers to run. It's 2 stories. So you have line refrigeration and prep refrigeration. You have walk-ins on one. Well, over the years, a couple of those have been abandoned and had actual condensing skids placed in them to run small reach-in refrigeration. There's a rack in the parking garage that someone built on a platform and hung and suspended. None of these things are on the drawing. I talked to my mechanical manager when we were doing this recent bar install, just the one I told you about.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I got another set. And I was like, dude, I'm telling you right now, like, things have happened. So when you're getting into that, that's why you gotta walk out there. You've got to spend time on there. You gotta look at it. Even I'll go back to that line drawer. Even if it's got casters, I can tell you if that thing's been sitting there for 15 years, the odds of that thing moving, not good. You know, you might want to have a pallet jack with you. Because when you go to try to move that bad boy, it ain't going nowhere. It's basically on
Wheels are
legs.
flat.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically on legs at this point, right?
Yep.
Because you know, I'm not going to pick on my operator friends, but you know, they don't want to pay to fix casters. You know,
That R&M bonus they get at the end of the year.
that's right. You know, they have to pay to fix refrigeration because they got to keep the foods cold, but they don't have to pay to fix their casters, so they usually don't fix
I
them.
mean, there's definitely pros to how y'all approach it and how Dan approaches it. You know, Dan's got, you know, cookie cutter items, you know, self-contained, everything's ready to go. Not all of his, you know, his walk-ins, his ACs, his ice machines are still remote, draft beer systems. You know, there's some things that takes him in you know, installs, you know, professionals, but, and then there's some pros and cons about how you do it, you know, the equipment quality and some of the things you guys do. Your drawer systems are all the same, we know that. But your racks, you know, Kyrack, you know, Hill Phoenix, you know, Cold Zone, whatever they might be.
I have some cold zones. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing too. You know, I've got generations. I've got Kyrax, cold zones, and Cool Tech because we actually have some glycol units too.
Yeah.
we have you know,
Started
refrigerant
doing
and
that.
glycol.
Yeah, started doing that a while back. You know, unfortunately, I know a lot about that. But it's crazy to think of all the differences. But you can't really you don't understand what you're going to get into until you look at it. You know, I mean, there's downsides to having, you know, there could be downsides to having the self-contained equipment stuff because you're maybe not evaluating that equipment. You know, you're saying, hey, that's a $3,000 cooler. I'm not going to keep putting money into it. I'm going to keep replacing it. Well, you know, you're 15 years in and you have the same system and does more service work, but he's 15 years in, he might be on the third or fourth one. You know, so I don't know what the cost revenue is to end users and to everybody is. I don't know what is the best plan. You know, because you're not going to change out a giant rack or custom cook line as much as you are individual units. So there's got to be some costs, and I don't know what's the best thing. You would know better than anybody on what is the best benefit, going self-contained or going custom, and what the service cost would be.
On our cook lines, it's a heat load issue.
Mhm.
We cannot use self-contained refrigeration on the hot side.
Yep.
We had a generation of restaurants that we built like that. I have 3 of them. And it is a nightmare every summer. They cannot keep up. They do not keep up.
Maintenance costs more.
Yeah, I mean, we have plans for switching the glycol at some point in time, but you know, there's 40 of those restaurants out there. Yeah. Dan, we're publicly traded too. Yeah.
Oh, and there's that.
Yeah.
Dan, okay, so you have a staff, you have a facilities team that handles as much of the installs as you can. What are some of the QC, quality control sorts of things that they do after it's been installed for maybe that day or for a couple of days, just to make sure everything's going along? You know, I mean, we've all had that situation where, oh, it looks like it's fixed and it's fine, but maybe you come back later and it's not. So what are you guys doing just to make sure everything was installed correctly and still working correctly once the install's complete?
Well, so we had that conversation with the facilities manager first. He's going to monitor the piece of equipment once it's in. And then obviously we always get great feedback from the executive chef if something's not working right. But you got 4 eyes, you know, keeping an eye on the equipment to make sure that it's performing as designed. You know, do we have a problem? Do we immediately need to call for warranty service or what's going on? It's working, you know. Now, I mean, I'm sitting here like, oh, my world is beautiful. You know, yours sucks, but mine's beautiful. I did 38 years in the, oh my God, my life sucks world. So I can, you know, I can relate with what you're going through. Because that wasn't what I had in prior life, you know? So yeah, I mean, this is great what I have, but I've got the ability to have a team to keep an eye on this and provide the feedback when something's not right. And I'm sure everybody's dealt with we took the box off and then we found the forklift hole going through the side of the through the cooler. There's always the hidden freight damage stuff. Those are always nice, surprises to deal with, but, prior life, no. I mean, it was not having an operator at a restaurant who could unbox the equipment, put the casters on it, peel the simple things like peel the plastic off a new refrigerator and then go roll it in.
Pet peeve of mine right there, bro. I hate that. Don't take that
You don't
off.
gotta peel up the side, right? You just leave stuff on the side?
I mean,
Yeah.
Actually, kind of like you're talking about with the dealers too. The fun is like some dealers can receive it is checking for freight damage first. Like there's dealers who have warehouses and warehouse things for like a major install or a major remodel or even a new location. It's behoove you to walk out there and pop all the tops off everything. I worked for A-Smart for years. I'm alma mater there. And Jonathan was my manager. And sure enough, when you said forklift damage, there was a little indentation on the box, and the delivery guy, nah, you need to take that off. The guy's like, nah. He goes, I'm not signing for it. You're taking it off. Right through it, But that is a value that a dealer, if you're like that, you're not just cutting POs and drop shipping.
No, we don't. We have deliver and inspect.
Yeah, that can be a very added value and a benefit and part of the install, right? Because I'm telling you, that's you get out there and that's not a phone call I want at midnight. Hey John, what's up, brother? So I got your new bar back, and guess what? So that is yeah.
Well, it'd be hard to check it all thoroughly because unless you see physical damage to the exterior of it, it doesn't look wrong. But we've all unboxed things brand new with damage from the factory.
Oh yeah,
it is.
I had DOAs in brand new restaurant we just opened last month.
Yeah, I've never received a piece
Charles
of equipment that was
DOA.
broken right on the first day. That's never happened in my life.
Yeah.
But it's like, what line do you draw? Does the dealer have to uncrate that unit, lay eyes on it, and say, yes, it looks good, then recrate it? Like, that's a fee that nobody really anticipates. So,
We try and do it upon delivery.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you guys had experienced anything differently, or someone does this and it works out really well.
Well, it's like I was saying, I've got the benefit of having
You
somebody
have on-site.
ears
You have on-site people. That's
but not everybody has.
Well, in that respect, I think, again, you're closer to almost like a school district or a college food service operation where they have, or healthcare, they have maintenance teams that have that little extra bit of knowledge that sometimes in restaurants you don't always get. You know what I mean? You're a dedicated team for that property, so to speak. I mean, you have how many properties you have to work? How many? You said
I
28
had
restaurants?
20,
Yeah, and like their children, they're all your favorite, right? I mean, but they're all different,
you say you have, executive stuff that will let you know, and that's great. I also have some that don't let me know.
Yep.
And honestly, those are the worst because you go by a month and a half later, I do a walk and they're like, oh, hey, when they're going to finish with the ice machine? I'm sorry, what? And like literally, they don't say anything. They just suffer in silence.
Are you going to
Let
the
me tell you, those
7-Eleven?
guys are.
yeah.
Go down to 7-Eleven to get the ice?
Yeah, it's been an inconvenience. We've been buying ice every weekend.
Yeah.
I told you about it.
Yeah, no, they literally will. They have some out there operators that do that, and I just I don't understand the world they live in.
Yeah.
Well, so Jeremy, after your guys, your crew, you guys have installed a draft line or something like that, something that's a little bit complicated. What's your QC process? Like, what do you guys have to do once a piece of equipment's been installed? You just say, well, that's it, later.
Yeah, no, we have a thorough check process. It can frankly suck sometimes, depending on manufacturer. You've got to, let's say draft, you've got to start a system, it doesn't matter whether it's chill right, Perlig, Micromatic, glass tender, there's checklists that they want to even pay you. I'm a direct installer for a lot of manufacturers, so they have to check XYZ. What is the pressure? What is the temperature? Is it flowing? Is it flowing at the right rate? You've got to have this thing operational before you're even allowed to leave. And it's not just operational. You got to watch it cycle off a couple times, a walk-in. walk-ins, you can't even set the superheat on walk-in until it's within a few degrees of set point. So yeah, that box that was sitting out in the sun for all day is now trying to pull down the temperature. You've got to watch it for, I've had walk-ins take 12 hours to pull down. I've had them take days. I've got a large warehouse freezer down the road for FDP and Lance and all them that I'm doing for Birdville ISD. We are planning for it to take over 2 days just to get that room temperature. And then I have to start my testing procedures, superheat, check, if there is oil systems on it, is that good? Electrical components, take amp readings on every component. When it's a 150-foot long walk-in, there's a lot of things to check, a lot of parts to check. So it's daunting to say the least, and it's a step that everybody in my industry is aware of, and that's the corner most people cut. They'll turn it on and say, yeah, you got the temperature, it'll look good, you're good to go. They didn't check those little things. Superheat is something that, minor people just graze over it. You'll blow a compressor up and lose a compressor 3-4 years down the road if it's flooding back to the compressor and you never checked it because you never put a set of gauges on it and just know it, oh yeah, it's running, I feel cold air, I'm good to go, let's leave, and I got my paycheck. That's the difference in an install and a good install, is going through your checks, your processes, making sure that draft beer system, that AC unit, that oven, everything is actually working how it should be, and filling out that report and giving it to the customer. Because now he knows, I did all these things, I checked all of this. You kind of can't come back on me, I checked the voltage, I checked all that. When I left, you had a voltage spike and it blew up this thing, it was reading this voltage now, and now it's reading this, you dropped the leg of power in the building, and single phase of compressor blew it up. So it's a liability check for you too. I checked all my steps, it's perfect now. I've left a month later, if it's not perfect, I can find the reason why if I have that report to look back at.
Yeah. What's your relationship like with service?
Like we're 100% service sections. We don't have in-house. I came through 12. That's about 10 years, so I had 3 technicians. So making that transition is a little different. But you have to build the relationship with. I'm going to tell you, like my mechanical, my refrigeration, AC guy, like that. I talk to them a lot. That's and my electrician, my plumbers. Those 3 trades are probably the people that I spend the most time with on a general. On hot side cooking equipment, I kind of throw them in the mechanical. Some of it's market based for me too. We do have some national accounts. So for hot side cooking equipment, we have SmartCare. But we have a contract in place where we pay a monthly fee, depending on the restaurant and the number of equipment. It may be $2,800 all the way up to $3,400 a month, and it's all inclusive. So the grill goes in, they put in a work order, you come out, you fix. Some pieces are not on it, hot food wells, bread warmers, but all the major cooking equipment, griddles, charbroilers, saute ranges, cheese melters, pasta cookers, fryers, tilt skillet. All of that's on that program. In my small markets, we don't have that. They don't have a presence there, so you're building that relationship with that local vendor. You can't. You can't whip the dog all the time. I'm just gonna tell you. You gotta understand what they're going through, but at the same time, you have to have an expectation that we send you an emergency. There's a 1 to 4 hour response time, and if you can't meet it, then tell them to work for us. Don't bite off more than you can chew. So I think a lot of that is building that relationship with the vendor to get them to understand how we operate, when to go in. They can't do service work at a cheesecake factory, right? It doesn't work. So it's the same thing with installs, right? It's like you got to get them on board with that. So I would say that's just really kind of, some is a national account, but most of it is going to be small local market operators.
All service is local,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can have that. SmartCare is systematically growing out its network on a nationwide basis, and that's great, but it's got to,
Oh, it is local.
But
In certain markets, they have an affectionate name called Dumb Bear.
yeah.
In other markets, they got some big guys.
Yeah, it's got to work here in Coppell, right? I mean, Yeah. Dan, we're sitting here, we're at a rep event today, right? Talk about your relationship with reps and how that relates to installs and equipment purchasing. Why is having a relationship with reps so important to you guys?
Well, I'm gonna kind of dial back and just say it's all about the equipment, the specification, and the support. I need that rep in order to make the connection to the manufacturer. That's the way this industry is designed. Like, I can't buy direct to a manufacturer unless well, Top Golf at the size it is, we cannot buy direct, so I have to go through a dealer. So when I'm shackled by that business model, then I've got to be sure that my relationship with Robbie is solid and she can get me to the relationship with the manufacturers. So that rep and that dealer also have to be really good friends. Like, if you got animosity between a dealer and a rep, then that's not gonna work as well. So it's the whole chain of relationships and communication, as everybody understand what I'm looking for. Again, manufacturer sales rep all the way down to where I'm sitting, or if it's my procurement people.
Yeah.
So many times there's a disconnect between what are you speccing, what are you buying versus what do I really need? And what is durable, what's holding up out there in the field? Why do we continue to buy a box that breaks down all the time because of, it results in a service call versus we could be doing something different, and therefore we give us a better result, a better life cycle on that asset. So, it's just like,
Yeah.
to me, it's a no-brainer to have friends in all the different levels of the chain and throughout the entire industry.
It isn't either or, it's all of it. And there's plenty, I think, to be able to go they all have to play they're all part of the team, whether they know it or not. They all play a role in your success.
Mm-hmm.
Getting them to work together. Yeah, I think that's, well, it sounds like you're orchestrating that's a good thing.
Well, you have to be, everybody in the facility side has to be involved. Because procurement may work at a different level and they don't understand what facilities is dealing with. Construction doesn't understand what facilities deals with. So you've got to have different avenues and you got to have different people sitting at the table in order to provide the information of what the struggles are. I've done several of those exercises where it was culinary, facilities, construction, and architects all sitting at a table doing a key sheet page turn, going through every item on those pages in order to understand culinary, what is it about this that doesn't work for you? Okay, facilities, what is it about this piece that doesn't work for you? Construction, is this a pain for you to install? What's going on? But everybody has to have a seat at the table in order for that to be successful.
Yeah, and understanding the roles and the needs, how that affects each other, but also how it contributes to the why. Why is Topgolf special? Why is Cheesecake Factory so successful? You know what I mean? Like, why they all play a role. And if we had your designer in here, I'm sure you would have a very specific reason why there's two different types of ice cream freezer, that you guys have, and so forth. It plays a role in his
We
mind.
want softer ice cream in the bar, not the chips.
See, there's a specific reason. There is a why.
There you go.
Understanding that why makes it so much easier.
So yeah, there is a reason. But yeah, as if with me with reps, I don't have in this role. I don't have as much.
Okay.
That's really more of our culinary team in California, and they would have far more influence with the designers as to what is specified in a Cheesecake Factory. I'm like for like. That's it. And I have operators that, why can't we do this, or why can't I do this, or why can't I make this change? And, we are like for like, to our own detriment at times. Yeah, it's also kind of nice not to be in that, but when I was in K through 12, I was in those situations where, dealing with culinary and facilities saying, I like this specific type of combi oven. It's like, well, so here's the downside to the one. I know why you like it. It has all these things. However, they will not train any of our guys to work on this oven, and we self-perform. So this creates a major issue with us, so that brand wasn't, didn't come to the table, in a sense, because, we put that in the bid when we wrote the RFP and said, hey, our techs must be trained in, and be able to do factory service work. So that particular brand wanted in, but wouldn't change. So, well, then you don't get the bid. Yeah, it is important, and I would imagine that, I can't imagine you would have any equipment they wouldn't allow you to self-perform.
Quick question.
Yeah, one thing I've learned about the reps is the fact that they're listening to anybody, right? Anybody in the organization, if you have an issue with a piece of equipment, it doesn't matter if it's facilities managers or if you are a person, they want to hear what's going on with that, and they're your best voice to that manufacturer. And you don't always get direct to the manufacturer, but you should do if you go to your rep. Your rep's going to meet you there. They want to know what's going on. They don't, they want to protect that manufacturer all they can, because their whole livelihood is built on that. So I work with the Restaurant Facility Management Association. And I try to tell these facility managers that if you don't know your rep, you have missed the best resource you have to lead back to the manufacturer. You better come with data. Don't come with facts. Don't come with an opinion. Don't come mad. Come to the table as a business person and represent your case.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I feel a lot of people miss out is you come with an opinion, and you come with an opinion without the data behind it, you're gonna get washed to the side of it because the person may have more than what they can do. Right? So again, I would highly recommend that rep. That rep is to me is the most important person in the equipment's life cycle.
Sure. All right, well, we're at time. I'm gonna let Jeremy get the last word here. So the question service agent, you see a little bit of everything, from everybody. You deal with big clients, small clients, right? Limited service, full service, everything in between. What's one common mistake that people should try to avoid to help make sure their installations go smoothly?
For installation, it's, I would say it's maybe take a little bit of playbook out of these guys' playbook. They're very consistent with what they do. Being well informed would be another thing. The small mom and pop restaurant, they might have 5 different dealers, 3 or 4 different reps come chirping at that door, and they don't know. They're hearing their pitch about this oven does this ice machine can do this, my dishwasher, you don't even got to look at it, look at this. And it can be confusing, daunting for the smaller people. The larger firms, they're going to stick with these numbers. We understand the cost might be a little bit higher, but we're getting a product that we're quality, and that's the same thing with install. You've got to put a good quality installation together. It doesn't matter whether it's a $1,500 unit or a $50,000 unit. If you don't put it together right, if you don't install it, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get a bad product out of anything. So, really communicate with your end users, know their needs and know what their wants are. If budget's their mind, there's certain brands we can do. It's not cheap, it's good, better, best. That's what we're all trained to say. But you can go with a product that will do the job, but their expectations have to be understood. Hey, this unit is great, it's going to work, but is it going to work great in 10 years? I don't, I'm not going to say that. I'm trained to build it, install it, and do a good job for you. But it's really about communication and knowing your product and knowing what you need. Y'all have heard that for lifetime, but I would say good communication, like we've all talked about today, a proper plan, number one, and then have the right equipment and the right rep in there. Have that relationship with that rep and that dealer be solid. And that's the key to success in anything. It's communication in your marriage, you want to communicate, in life, you want to communicate with your kids, with business, it's all the same. Good communication and a proper plan makes success for anything in life.
Awesome. We will end on that note. Thank you guys for your questions, for your contributions. Thanks to our panel for what you guys did today here. We appreciate it. Thank you guys. Some of you returned back, hoping to win some Legos. So we're going to see who the winner is. All right, John, you're closest. Pick a ticket.
All right, our winner is going to be ending in 016.
016.
016. We have a winner. All right. Well, thanks. I hope you guys get a chance. You know, our guys are here. If you want to come up and ask them a question you feel like asking. Oh, the other thing, for those of you who didn't see it before, one of the other consultants, he found a bunch of old magazines from like 50 years ago in his office. If you want to see what things were like in terms of maintenance and checklists and things they were designing for back then, it's kind of an interesting walk down memory lane. You're welcome to take a look at those as well. Otherwise, thanks for your time.
Checklist stuff.